main message of the Wattie Fletcher Lecture is actually that I want to make people aware that not everything which is published, which is available, is also true. There are all sort of filters which really work, and through those filters, only positive news really reaches the end point, and that's a publication, but it's also the general public or patients. Negative news is hardly ever going to be published. I've never seen a publication by, especially by industry-sponsored studies, where they say our product doesn't work. That doesn't happen. It always works. And if it doesn't work, they find other endpoints to make it work. So you really have to realize that this is filtered. And it's also filtered by editors, because editors of journals want positive news, because positive news gives you more citations, and more citations means a higher impact factor. Always be critical. Don't be cynical, but be critical, and try to realize that what you read might have another intention than only reporting science. What should I do as editor to make people aware that the news they get, the medical news, is not always the whole truth or could be filtered? First of all, always see if there's a hypothesis, because there is no research without a hypothesis. That's one very, very important. Secondly, you always have to look at the study design, if the sort of design, and if it's randomized or not randomized, that's very important. And thirdly, you have to look at the outcomes. So I give you an example, which I also gave in the Wattie Fletcher Lecture. If you study swans, don't report on the quality of the water. I mean, and that's what you see quite often. We study vessel patency, and we report about clinical TLR, which is not related to patency. So always try to really see what is studied and what is reported. But the biggest problem for the moment is, and I have a big warning sign up for this, and I always also did it in the Wattie Fletcher Lecture, and that is something hardly everybody has heard of nowadays. And I'm so surprised that it's a silent, very, very dangerous revolution. And that's the so-called preprints. Nowadays, you can upload your manuscript without any scrutination on a preprint site. There are many of those sites, and it even gets a DOI number, so it's citable. You can find it back in programs like Google Research, and so you have to be aware. But these are all unscrutinized, non-peer-reviewed papers, and we nowadays see that these unscrutinized, citable papers are basis for other unscrutinized, non-peer-reviewed papers. So there is a complete parallel world now developing, where you have non-peer-reviewed papers which are supported by non-peer-reviewed papers. So nobody knows what the truth is anymore. And I think this is the biggest threat to medical science. And it's very important to realize that the eyes of the public are completely different than the eyes of a doctor. And that you see this, for instance, one of the big issues at the moment is all those people who do not want to be vaccinated for COVID. And that's because they get so much confusing so-called evidence from all sorts of sources, and also even preprint publications. And I'm afraid that people who publish some medical science never realize that the effect on the general public is so great nowadays. In the old days, only the people who read the journal and who had a subscription read about this. And by the end of the day, that's it. But nowadays, everything is multiplied million and million of times over all the social media, and is liked and retweeted and whatever. So even the smallest conspiracy theory derived from a medical paper can be spread all over the world. And I think we don't realize that the world has changed in this dramatically. How can we improve this widespread medical news, which is not really scrutinized at all? I think it's important for physicians. They have a task to speak out loud about this. This is one. And secondly, we should really have a sort of a CE mark for scientific quality. Of course, peer review is one, but there should be some other things. So at the end of the day, you could go there and I realize as a journalist, for instance, and say, well, I've looked it up and it's all complete nonsense. That's the way I think as an editor, I should try to make people understand that not everything which is published or which is spread is true or is important.